My father intentionally destroyed me on graduation day. The dean handed me my diploma at 10:23 a.m. on a Sunday in May. By 10:51 a.m., 3 police officers were escorting me off campus, while my father stood in the parking lot with his arms crossed, watching. The charge was academic fraud. The evidence was a USB drive containing what appeared to be 4 years of purchased essays, forged research data, and plagiarized thesis work. All of it planted in my dorm room 3 days earlier while I was at my final presentation. All of it done by the man who taught me to ride a bike. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there for months, maybe years. But you don't expect your own father to orchestrate your complete destruction with the precision of a military operation. You don't expect the person who coached your little league team to spend 6 months building a false criminal case against you. You don't expect love to look like premeditated sabotage. I was wrong about all of it. My name is Alex Thornton, and I graduated summa cum laude from Stanford with a degree in biomedical engineering. Except I didn't graduate, because by noon that Sunday, my degree was revoked, my acceptance to Johns Hopkins Medical School was withdrawn, and my reputation was destroyed so thoroughly that people I'd known for 4 years wouldn't make eye contact with me in the parking lot while campus security supervised me packing my belongings into boxes. My mother stood 50 feet away, crying into her phone. My younger sister Olivia sat in the car, her graduation gift to me still wrapped on her lap. She was 15. She didn't understand what was happening. Neither did I. Not yet. But I figured it out. It took me 3 months, $22,000 in legal fees, and a private investigator named Rebecca Huang, who'd spent 12 years in forensic accounting before switching to investigation work. What we uncovered wasn't just evidence of my father's sabotage. It was a pattern. A systematic, documented campaign of destruction that had started the day I got my Stanford acceptance letter 4 years earlier. He'd been planning this since I was 17 years old, and he'd done it all because I'd made one mistake. I'd succeeded where he'd failed. Growing up, my father was my hero. Gregory Thornton, partner at Thornton & Associates Architecture, the firm his own father had founded in 1968. He had the corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. He drove a silver Lexus. He wore custom suits. He gave speeches at industry conferences about sustainable urban design, and he was absolutely miserable, though I didn't understand that until much later. What I understood as a kid was that my dad was important, successful, and respected. I wanted to be exactly like him, except I didn't want to be an architect. I wanted to be a doctor, specifically a pediatric cardiac surgeon. That dream started when I was 9 years old, and my best friend Noah collapsed during soccer practice. Congenital heart defect, undiagnosed. He survived because of an emergency surgery performed by Dr. Lydia Kemp at Seattle Children's Hospital. I visited Noah during his recovery, saw the scar down his chest, listened to him describe waking up with tubes and monitors and strangers in scrubs who'd literally held his heart in their hands and fixed it. From that moment, I knew. I wanted to be the person who fixed broken hearts. I wanted to be the person who gave kids like Noah more time. My father supported this dream, publicly. He told relatives I was going to be a doctor, bragged to colleagues about my science grades, attended every academic awards ceremony. He bought me anatomy textbooks for my birthday. He drove me to volunteer shifts at the hospital when I started doing patient transport work at 16. He even helped me write my Stanford application essay, spending hours with me at the dining room table, refining my personal statement about Noah's surgery and my commitment to pediatric medicine. When my acceptance letter arrived, he cried. Actually cried, pulling me into a hug and saying he'd never been more proud. I believed him. I didn't know that acceptance letter had destroyed something inside him. I didn't know he'd applied to Stanford 32 years earlier and been rejected. I didn't know he'd wanted to be a biomedical engineer, had dreamed of working in medical device development, had only gone into architecture because it was the family business, and his father had made it clear there were no other options. I didn't know any of that because he'd never told me. He'd buried it so deep that even my mother didn't know the full extent of his resentment. But it was there, festering, waiting. And when I succeeded where he'd failed, something inside him snapped. The sabotage started small. Looking back, I can see it clearly now. But at the time, each incident seemed like bad luck or my own carelessness. 3 weeks into my freshman year, my laptop was stolen from my dorm room. Campus security said there'd been a string of thefts. They filed a report. Nothing came of it. I had to buy a replacement with money I'd saved from my summer job, which meant I couldn't afford the biology textbooks I needed. I made it work, borrowing from the library, studying with classmates. But it set me back. My grades that first semester were good, not great. A 3.6 GPA instead of the 4.0 I'd planned. My father said it was a learning experience, that college was harder than high school, that I'd do better next semester. Second semester, my student ID mysteriously deactivated 2 days before finals. I couldn't access the library, couldn't get into my dorm building, couldn't buy food at the dining hall. The student services office said it was a system glitch, but it took them 3 days to fix it. 3 days during which I was effectively locked out of all campus resources during the most critical study period of the semester. I slept in the common room. I studied in coffee shops. I ate granola bars from the convenience store. My finals performance suffered. My GPA dropped to 3.5. My father said these things happened, that I needed to be more resilient, that medical school admissions committees wanted to see how students handled adversity. Sophomore year, my financial aid application was mysteriously rejected. The form I'd submitted was flagged for providing false information about household income, except I hadn't provided false information. Someone had altered my FAFSA after I'd submitted it, changing numbers to make it appear my family earned significantly more than we actually did. By the time the error was corrected, I'd missed the deadline for most scholarship applications. I took out loans. My father offered to help with tuition, said he didn't want me stressed about money. I accepted. I didn't realize I was creating dependence. I didn't realize he was building leverage. The pattern continued. Lost recommendation letters that had to be rewritten, forcing me to awkwardly ask professors twice. A false plagiarism accusation in my chemistry class that took 3 weeks to resolve and nearly gave me a panic attack. A burglary in my off-campus apartment junior year that somehow only took my research notes for my thesis project. 3 months of work gone. Each incident was stressful, disruptive, costly. Each one chipped away at my confidence and my GPA. Each one was carefully designed to look like random bad luck. And each one, I later discovered, had my father's fingerprints all over it. He visited campus regularly, once a month, sometimes more. He'd take me to dinner, ask about my classes, my research, my medical school applications. He seemed supportive, engaged, proud. He met my professors at university events. He toured the biomedical engineering labs. He asked detailed questions about my thesis project on cardiac tissue regeneration. I thought he was being a good father. I thought he was interested in my work. I didn't realize he was gathering intelligence. I didn't realize every detail I shared was being stored, cataloged, and weaponized. Senior year, everything accelerated. I'd applied to 15 medical schools. Johns Hopkins was my first choice. Their pediatric cardiac surgery program was ranked #1 in the country. I'd spent my entire undergraduate career building toward that application. Research experience in Dr. Patricia Vasquez's lab studying congenital heart defects, a 3.78 GPA despite all the setbacks, MCAT score of 521, volunteer work at 3 different hospitals, recommendation letters from 5 different professors and physicians. My application was strong. Not perfect, but strong. I had a real chance. The Johns Hopkins acceptance letter arrived in March. I was in the library when I got the email. I actually screamed, loud enough that the librarian shushed me. I called my parents immediately. My mother cried. My father congratulated me, said we'd celebrate that weekend, that he'd make reservations at my favorite restaurant. He sounded genuinely happy. I believed him. I was an idiot. The celebration dinner was perfect. My parents, my sister, my grandparents. We went to Ray's Boathouse, this upscale seafood place overlooking Puget Sound. My father gave a toast about how proud he was, how I'd worked so hard, how I was going to change lives. He ordered champagne. He paid for everything. He hugged me in the parking lot afterward and told me I was going to be an amazing doctor. I went back to Stanford feeling like I was floating. I had 6 weeks until graduation, 6 weeks until my future officially started. I had no idea those 6 weeks would be spent watching everything I'd built collapse. April brought the first real warning sign. I received an email from Johns Hopkins saying they needed to verify some information on my application. Specifically, they needed to confirm my research experience with Dr. Vasquez. They'd received an anonymous tip suggesting I'd exaggerated my role in her lab. The email was polite, professional, routine. These kinds of verification requests happened occasionally. I forwarded it to Dr. Vasquez immediately, asking her to contact Johns Hopkins directly. She did. She confirmed everything I'd claimed, sent them copies of my research contributions, even included me as a co-author on a paper we were submitting for publication. Johns Hopkins thanked her for the clarification. Crisis averted. Except it wasn't a crisis. It was a test. My father was testing the system, seeing how easy it would be to plant doubt. 2 weeks later, another email. This time from Stanford's Academic Integrity Board. They'd received an allegation that my senior thesis contained plagiarized sections. The allegation was anonymous, submitted through the university's online reporting system. The board was required to investigate. They asked me to meet with them to discuss the claim. I was shocked, terrified. My thesis was entirely original work, 18 months of research and writing. I'd cited every source meticulously. I knew I hadn't plagiarized anything, but the accusation alone was enough to trigger a formal review. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend going through my thesis page by page, checking every citation, every reference, every piece of data. Everything was correct. Everything was properly attributed. I brought all my documentation to the meeting. Research notes, draft versions showing the evolution of my work, emails with Dr. Vasquez discussing my methodology. The Integrity Board reviewed everything. They ran my thesis through plagiarism detection software. Nothing flagged. They compared it to published literature. Nothing matched. After 3 hours, they concluded the allegation was baseless. They apologized for the stress, said anonymous tips had to be investigated, wished me luck with graduation. I left that meeting shaking. Not from relief, but from anger. Someone had tried to destroy me. Someone had filed a false allegation knowing it would trigger an investigation right before graduation. Someone wanted me to fail. I didn't know who. I didn't suspect my father. Not yet, but I started paying attention. The next incident came 5 days before graduation. I was moving out of my apartment, packing up 4 years of accumulated belongings. My roommate Kieran was helping me load boxes into my car when 2 men in suits approached us. They identified themselves as private investigators working for a law firm. They asked if I was Alex Thornton. I said yes. They handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a cease and desist letter from a biotechnology company called MedTech Innovations. They claimed I'd stolen proprietary research data during an internship I'd completed the previous summer. They were threatening legal action unless I signed a document acknowledging the theft and agreeing to destroy all materials. I'd never stolen anything. My internship had been completely legitimate, supervised by their senior research director, Dr. Nathaniel Cross. I'd signed all the appropriate confidentiality agreements. I'd followed every protocol, but here was a legal letter claiming otherwise, with specific allegations about files I'd supposedly downloaded without authorization. Files that, according to the letter, matched data I'd used in my senior thesis. The implication was clear. They were accusing me of building my academic work on stolen corporate secrets. I called Dr. Cross immediately. He was confused. He hadn't authorized any legal action. He didn't know anything about stolen data. He said he'd contact MedTech's legal department and clear this up, but the damage was done. The letter had been sent. The allegation existed, and graduation was in 5 days. I couldn't afford another investigation, another delay, another crisis. I was starting to panic. That's when my father called. He'd heard about the MedTech situation. He didn't say how. He offered to help, said he had a friend who was a lawyer, someone who could make this go away quickly. I accepted. I was desperate. I didn't have money for a lawyer. I didn't have time to fight this myself. My father said not to worry, that he'd handle everything, that I should focus on finals and graduation. He sounded concerned, protective, like a father should sound. I trusted him. The lawyer, a man named Gordon Fletcher, called me the next day. He said he'd reviewed the MedTech allegations and found them completely baseless. He'd sent a response to their legal team, threatened to countersue for defamation if they pursued this further. He expected them to back down within 24 hours. He was right. MedTech sent a retraction letter the following afternoon. They apologized for the misunderstanding, said there had been an internal miscommunication, wished me well in my future career. Crisis averted. Again. Except I was starting to notice a pattern. Every crisis seemed to come from nowhere, escalate rapidly, then disappear just as quickly. Every incident was perfectly timed to cause maximum stress without quite derailing my progress. It felt orchestrated, but I couldn't figure out who would want to sabotage me. I had no enemies. I wasn't involved in any drama. I kept my head down, focused on my work. I was nobody's threat, or so I thought. Graduation day started normally. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. in my apartment, now empty except for my bed and a suitcase. My parents and sister were staying at a hotel downtown. They were coming to campus at 9 a.m. for the ceremony. I put on my cap and gown. I looked at myself in the mirror. 4 years. Somehow, I'd made it. Despite the stolen laptop, the financial aid problems, the plagiarism accusation, the MedTech situation, the dozens of other small disasters that had plagued my time at Stanford, I was here. I was graduating. I was going to Johns Hopkins. I'd won. The ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main quad. I arrived at 9:15 a.m., joined the other engineering students lining up alphabetically. The sun was out. Families were taking photos. Everyone was smiling. It felt surreal and perfect. My parents found me in the crowd. My mother hugged me. My sister gave me a card she'd made, decorated with drawings of stethoscopes and hearts. My father shook my hand, pulled me into a hug, said he was proud. He meant it. I could see it in his eyes. Except I was wrong. What I saw wasn't pride. It was something else. Something I didn't recognize until much later. Relief. He was relieved because he knew what was coming. He knew what he'd done, and he was relieved it was finally over. The ceremony began. The speeches were long and boring. I barely listened. I was too focused on the moment my name would be called, the moment I'd walk across that stage and receive my diploma. That moment came at 10:23 a.m. Dean Lawrence Montgomery called my name. I stood up, walked to the stage, shook his hand. He handed me my diploma. I smiled. Someone in the crowd whooped. Probably Kieran. I walked back to my seat feeling like I was dreaming. I'd done it. At 10:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from my academic advisor, Professor Julia Bennett. "We need to talk. Urgent. Meet me at my office immediately." My stomach dropped. I texted back asking what was wrong. She didn't respond. I stood up, still in my cap and gown, and walked to the engineering building. Professor Bennett was waiting in her office. She wasn't alone. Dean Montgomery was there. So was Dr. Vasquez. And 3 people I didn't recognize. One of them introduced himself as Lieutenant David Okonkwo with Stanford's Department of Public Safety. He asked if I'd consent to a search of my dorm room. I asked why. He said they'd received credible evidence that I'd been involved in academic fraud. I said that was impossible, that I'd just graduated, that my thesis had been cleared by the Integrity Board 2 weeks ago. He said this was new information, received that morning. Anonymous tip. They had a warrant. Campus security, not real police, but they had authorization from the university. I didn't have a choice. I went with them. We walked across campus, me still in my graduation gown, feeling like I was in a nightmare. People stared. My phone was buzzing constantly. Texts from my parents asking where I was. I ignored them. We reached my dorm building. My room was on the 3rd floor. I unlocked the door. The search took 12 minutes. They went straight to my desk drawer, like they knew exactly where to look. Inside, they found a USB drive. I'd never seen it before. Lieutenant Okonkwo plugged it into my laptop, opened the files, essays, dozens of them, all purchased from an online paper mill, all dated across the past 4 years, all with my name attached as the buyer. There were also research files, data sets that matched my thesis work, but with metadata showing they'd been downloaded from proprietary databases without authorization, plagiarized sections from published papers, highlighted and annotated. I said it wasn't mine. I said someone had planted it. I sounded exactly like every guilty person who'd ever been caught. Lieutenant Okonkwo asked if anyone else had access to my room. I said no. He asked if I'd lent my keys to anyone. I said no. He asked if I'd noticed anything suspicious in the past week. I said I'd been packing, moving out. I hadn't spent much time in the room. He asked for my laptop. I gave it to him. They took it as evidence. By 11 a.m., I was sitting in Dean Montgomery's office while he explained that my degree was being revoked pending a full investigation. He said Stanford had a zero-tolerance policy for academic fraud. He said the evidence was substantial and credible. He said they'd be contacting Johns Hopkins to inform them of the situation. He said I needed to leave campus immediately. He asked if I understood. I nodded. I didn't understand anything. I walked back to the quad in a daze. The ceremony was over. Families were taking photos, celebrating. I found my parents. My father saw my face and asked what was wrong. I told him. I watched his reaction carefully. He looked shocked, confused, angry on my behalf. He said this was ridiculous, that we'd get a lawyer, that we'd fight this. He was perfect. Every micro-expression, every word, every gesture, exactly what a concerned father should do. But I saw something else, just for a second. When I mentioned the USB drive, his eyes changed. Not surprise. Recognition. He knew about it. He knew it would be there. And in that moment, I knew. My father had done this. I didn't confront him. Not then. I was too shocked, too uncertain. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was paranoid from the stress. But I started watching him. Really watching him. The way he asked questions about the investigation. The way he offered to help. The way he insisted I stay calm, not make accusations, let the process work. He was managing me, controlling the narrative, making sure I didn't look too closely at who might have planted that evidence. The next 3 days were hell. Stanford launched a formal investigation. They interviewed me 4 times. They examined my laptop, my emails, my cloud storage. They contacted every professor I'd had, every TA who'd graded my work. They were thorough, and they found nothing, because I'd never committed fraud. My work was legitimate, but the USB drive existed. It had my name on the purchase records. The metadata showed it had been created on my laptop, and I couldn't prove it wasn't mine. Someone had been very, very careful. Johns Hopkins withdrew my acceptance on day 3. The email was brief and formal. Due to serious allegations of academic misconduct, they could not proceed with my enrollment. They wished me well. 4 years of work. Gone. My career before it had even started. Destroyed. I sat in my childhood bedroom, the one I'd left 4 years ago when I went to Stanford, and stared at that email for an hour. Then I called Rebecca Huang. Rebecca Huang, private investigator. 12 years as a forensic accountant with Ernst & Young before starting her own firm specializing in corporate fraud and digital forensics. Her website said she'd worked on cases involving identity theft, embezzlement, and evidence tampering. I booked a consultation. Cost $400 for 2 hours. I paid with my credit card, the one I'd maxed out paying for textbooks and groceries when my financial aid fell through sophomore year. The balance was $8,200. What was another $400? We met at her office in downtown Seattle. Small space, 3rd floor of an old building. She listened to everything. The 4 years of incidents, the pattern, the timing, the USB drive, my suspicion about my father. She didn't react, just took notes, asked clarifying questions. When I finished, she said, "If your father did this, he's been planning it for years. That level of patience and detail requires serious motivation. What does he gain from destroying your career?" I didn't have an answer. She said, "That's what we need to figure out. Motivation tells us method. Method gives us evidence." She started with the USB drive. She requested the forensic report from Stanford's IT department. Took 3 weeks and a formal legal request from an attorney I'd hired, Gordon Fletcher's rival, a woman named Diana Torres. Diana Torres, 26 years practicing education law, former prosecutor, reputation for eating universities alive when they violated student rights. She cost $350 per hour. I paid it. I had no choice. The forensic report came back. The USB drive had been created on my laptop, specifically on April 28th at 2:17 a.m. Except I had an alibi for that time. I was proctoring an exam for Dr. Vasquez's undergraduate class. Security footage from the engineering building showed me in the exam room from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. I couldn't have been in two places at once. Rebecca examined the laptop. She found remote access software buried deep in the system files. Someone had installed it months earlier, maybe years. They'd been accessing my laptop remotely, monitoring my files, my emails, my browsing history. They knew everything. They'd used that access to create the USB drive, to modify the metadata, to make it look like I'd done it. Except they'd made one mistake. The remote access timestamps didn't match the USB creation timestamp. They were off by 4 minutes. Small error, but fatal. It proved someone else had created that evidence. It proved I'd been framed. We had evidence of tampering, but we didn't have proof of who did it. Rebecca dug deeper. She traced the remote access software to an IP address, residential address in Seattle, my parents' house, specifically my father's home office. The software had been installed on my laptop 3 years ago, during summer break, when I'd left my laptop at my parents' house while I traveled to a conference. My father had access, opportunity, but we still needed motive. That's when Rebecca found the Stanford rejection letter. My father had kept it, in a locked file cabinet in his home office. Rebecca obtained access through a search warrant Diana Torres had secured as part of a civil suit we'd filed against Stanford for wrongful degree revocation. The warrant allowed us to examine any evidence relevant to the academic fraud investigation. My father's files qualified because he'd been my financial supporter and had access to my devices. The police executed the search warrant on a Thursday afternoon while my father was at work. My mother was home. She let them in, confused and frightened. Inside the filing cabinet, they found 32 years of documents. My father's Stanford rejection letter from 1993, his acceptance to University of Washington architecture program, his father's letter explaining why he couldn't support his son's dream of being an engineer, why the family business needed him, letters from my father to Stanford admissions, asking them to reconsider, explaining his circumstances. They'd said no, he'd never gotten over it. And then I'd succeeded where he'd failed. But that wasn't all. The filing cabinet also contained detailed records of every incident I'd experienced at Stanford. Dates, times, methods. My stolen laptop, planned and executed by a man my father had hired, a former student who needed money and didn't ask questions. The financial aid sabotage, accomplished by accessing my student account using password reset questions only a parent would know. The false plagiarism accusation, submitted anonymously through a public computer at the Seattle Public Library. The MedTech legal threat, completely fabricated. The law firm didn't exist. Gordon Fletcher wasn't a real lawyer. He was an actor my father had hired. Everything documented. Everything planned. Everything designed to stress me, drain my resources, damage my confidence, but never quite enough to make me quit. Because my father didn't want me to quit. He wanted me to succeed, just enough to feel the achievement before he ripped it away. The final piece was a journal. Handwritten entries dating back 4 years. My father's thoughts, his rationalizations, his satisfaction at watching me struggle. One entry, dated the day after my Johns Hopkins acceptance. He doesn't deserve this. He doesn't understand what it takes, what it costs. I will show him. I will make him feel what I felt. I will make him understand that success isn't about talent or work. It's about who allows you to have it. And I don't allow this. We had everything. Evidence, motive, confession. Diana Torres filed criminal charges, fraud, identity theft, computer crimes, interference with educational opportunities. The prosecutor, a man named Luis Ramirez, reviewed the evidence and agreed to pursue the case. My father was arrested at his office on a Monday morning. Made the local news. Prominent architect accused of sabotaging son's education. His firm put him on immediate leave. His partners distanced themselves. His clients pulled projects. His reputation, the thing he'd spent 30 years building, collapsed in 72 hours. The trial took 8 months to schedule. During that time, Stanford reinstated my degree after their own investigation confirmed I'd been framed. Johns Hopkins reconsidered my application, but the damage was done. I'd missed the enrollment deadline. They offered me admission for the following year. I declined. I couldn't go back to medicine. Not after this. The dream was tainted. Every time I thought about becoming a doctor, I thought about my father's journal, his hatred, his need to destroy me because I'd succeeded. I couldn't separate the achievement from the abuse. Instead, I took a job at a medical device startup, biomedical engineering position, exactly what my father had wanted to do before his father forced him into architecture. Entry level, $68,000 salary. I designed cardiac monitoring systems. It wasn't saving lives directly, but it was helping. And it was mine. My father couldn't touch it. The trial lasted 6 days. The prosecution presented everything. The remote access software, the staged incidents, the journal. My father's defense argued he'd been trying to help me, that the journal entries were taken out of context, that he'd only wanted to make me stronger by creating controlled challenges. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 months later. Judge Amanda Rothstein looked at my father and said, "You systematically destroyed your son's achievements because you couldn't handle his success. You spent 4 years, thousands of dollars, and immeasurable emotional energy tearing down the person you should have been protecting. This wasn't parenting. This was psychological warfare. She sentenced him to 3 years in prison, restitution of $43,000, covering my legal fees and lost opportunities, 5 years probation after release, permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with me. My mother divorced him while he was in prison. My sister hasn't spoken to him since the arrest. She's in college now, studying psychology. She says she wants to understand how a parent can hate their child's success so much they'd rather destroy them than watch them thrive. I don't have an answer for her. I still work at the medical device startup. Got promoted last year. Senior engineer now. $95,000 salary. I'm developing a new cardiac monitoring system for pediatric patients. Kids like Noah. It's not surgery. It's not the dream I had. But it's meaningful work. And it's untainted. Nobody can take it from me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd failed on my own. If I'd gotten rejected from Stanford. Or flunked out. Or decided medicine wasn't for me. Would my father have been happy? Would he have supported me then, knowing I wasn't a threat to his ego? Or would he have found another way to hurt me, another success to destroy? I'll never know. And I've stopped trying to figure it out. He's been out of prison for 8 months now, living in a halfway house in Tacoma, working part-time at a drafting firm. His architecture license was suspended. His former partners won't touch him. He sends letters sometimes. My attorney intercepts them, as required by the restraining order. She asks if I want to read them. I always say no. There's nothing he can say that would matter. The man I thought was my father never existed. He was a character Gregory Thornton played while he plotted my destruction. I don't mourn that character anymore. I mourned him during the trial, during the sentencing, during the year of therapy it took to process this. Now I just feel nothing. Absence of feeling. Absence of him. My sister asked me recently if I forgive him. I said forgiveness isn't relevant. Forgiveness implies a relationship worth salvaging. We don't have that. We never did. What we had was his performance of fatherhood and my belief in that performance. When the performance ended, so did we. She asked if I'm angry. I said I was. For a long time. But anger is exhausting. And he's not worth my energy anymore. He already took 4 years of my life. I won't give him another day. Olivia graduates high school next year. She's applied to 15 colleges. Not Stanford. She can't look at that campus without thinking about what happened to me. I understand that. Some places are ruined forever. Not by what they are, but by what they represent. She's smart. Smarter than I was at her age. She'll do well wherever she goes. And I'll be there. Front row. No matter what. Because that's what family does. Real family. Not the performative kind. The kind that shows up. The kind that celebrates success instead of sabotaging it. The kind I'm building now, deliberately, carefully, with people who actually want me to thrive. Rebecca Huang still sends me Christmas cards, ends me. Diana Torres invited me to her retirement party last month. Dr. Vasquez wrote me a recommendation letter for my promotion. These are the people who saw me at my lowest and chose to help. They didn't have to. They had no obligation to me. But they believed me. They fought for me. They proved that not everyone is like my father. That some people actually mean it when they say they care. I don't tell this story often. Most people at work don't know. My colleagues know I went to Stanford, that I work in biomedical engineering, that I'm good at what I do. They don't know about the trial, the prison sentence, the father who tried to destroy me, and I prefer it that way. This isn't my identity. It's a thing that happened to me. Terrible, formative, painful, but it's not who I am. Who I am is the person who survived it, the person who rebuilt, the person who found meaning in engineering instead of medicine, the person who learned that success isn't about achieving the exact dream you started with. Sometimes it's about salvaging what you can and building something new from the wreckage. My father wanted me to feel what he felt, rejected, powerless, watching someone else achieve what should have been mine. He succeeded. I did feel that. For months, maybe years. But here's what he didn't anticipate. Feeling that pain didn't destroy me. It clarified something. I learned that achievement without support is still achievement. That rebuilding after sabotage is its own kind of success. That the people who try to tear you down only have power if you let them define your worth. And I stopped letting him define anything about me the day the jury read that verdict. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.